Hello, everybody. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to welcome you to a discussion about fostering innovation and the growth of entrepreneurship. This conversation stems from our recently released 2020 Ann Arbor Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Report. If you haven't seen that, you can go to EntryPoint's website, and under what we do, we have all of our research aggregated under there, so you can view it at any time. So EntryPoint's a nonprofit research institution. And as most of you know, we partner with organizations to deliver comprehensive research insights and implement effective data-driven programs that promote entrepreneurship across the Midwest. And so I'm Emily Heintz. I'm the founder and managing director of EntryPoint. And today I'm joined by Patti Glaza, the managing director of ID Ventures. Patti is on EntryPoint's advisory board and is one of the most active venture capital investors in companies in the Ann Arbor region. ID Ventures is the venture investment team of Invest Detroit. They scale promising early stage startups into thriving companies that help support the state's economy, provide jobs to local talent, and bolster Michigan's growing startup community. I'm also joined by,
Hi everyone, welcome, or great to be here. Thank you for coming.
I'm also joined by Kelly Sexton, who's the Associate Vice President for Research, Technology Transfer, Innovation Partnerships at the University of Michigan. Kelly is making a huge impact on the global tech community. The U of M Tech Transfer is responsible for commercializing research discoveries. And this past year, U of M Tech Transfer team worked with U of M inventors on 502 new discoveries, entered into 232 commercialization agreements, and helped to launch 22 new startups, which all were record-breaking for the University of Michigan Tech Transfer team. So super excited to have Kelly.
Good morning. Thank you, Emily, and thank you everyone for being here.
Yay. And last but not least, we're joined by Doug Song, who's the co-founder and general manager of Duo Security at Cisco. Doug is a longtime leader of the tech ecosystem in Ann Arbor, as well as a supporter of many community initiatives across the region. Duo Security is an Ann Arbor-based cybersecurity company which enables organizations to secure access to all work applications for all users from anywhere, helping prevent cyber breach and attack. Duo has transformed the cybersecurity industry and become the highest valued venture-backed startup and first unicorn company in Michigan. And in 2008, Cisco acquired Duo Security for $2.35 billion, with a B. Yeah. Hey, okay. So first question, I'm like cracking up right now. Okay, first question. How would you guys describe Ann Arbor in terms of the national tech landscape? What are the strengths and what are the challenges?
All right, so I'll jump in. So Ann Arbor, well, first I want to thank EntryPoint and you, Emily and Molly, for putting together the Entrepreneurship Report. I think it's really critical that we benchmark our regions and our communities to understand, how are we moving? And it's really hard to say, we're just using kind of qualitative information if we're, based on our gut versus having information that's kind of documented year after year. So starting to have these and really be able to go back to data, I think is really critical. So thank you for pulling this together. So I've been involved in the entrepreneurship community in Ann Arbor for the last 20 or so years. Lots of change, lots of growth. I think the biggest change that I've seen is just density, which has been driven by a lot of things. So one, having venture firms active and a number of more venture firms coming into the Ann Arbor community, either being organic and growing here or coming from out of state, so having capital. The university certainly has been, University of Michigan has been doing a phenomenal job of increasing the number of great startups coming out of the university. But also folks like Doug, who have done sort of these repeat startups and are having great success, and then not just cashing out and retiring somewhere to the Caymans, but starting to reinvest in the next startup. And so we've got this reinforcing talent that's starting to really build a density of companies and talent and capital in our community.
Great. So I guess I've been at the University of Michigan about 2.5 years now. And before coming here, I was at the Research Triangle Park area of North Carolina at NC State University. And so I like to say different ecosystem, similar conversation. Unless you're sitting in the Bay Area or Boston or New York, you're in a community that's having the same conversation. How do we grow our regional entrepreneurial ecosystem? How do we attract more talent and more capital? Because we know that there's just regional forces at work that make those three ecosystems incredibly attractive. And that's where most of the venture capital money is invested. Around 75% goes to those 3 states. So for the rest of the US, we have to figure out how do we take advantage of all of our strengths and build on success. And we have a lot of areas of strength in Ann Arbor. So we have the nation's largest public research university in our backyard. We also have 2 additional great R1 universities within an hour drive. So if you put the 3 universities of the University Research Corridor together, we're producing innovation and talent to rival any university hub in the country. We have a history of manufacturing and innovation. And to me, what it means to me is that we don't get excited about building the next Angry Birds app. We get excited about things that matter: unmet medical needs, medical devices, diagnostics, healthcare, using AI to help cities understand where to focus their lead cleanup efforts, creating cybersecurity infrastructure for industry and for our country. So, these are the unique contributions that I think our area can offer, by connecting university innovation with the talent of entrepreneurs. I think we have a huge advantage in having better connectivity between Ann Arbor and Detroit. I think the recent announcement with CAVNU and the state of Michigan and U of M and Ford and ACM about the opportunity for a connected autonomous vehicle corridor with Detroit is a huge step in the right direction. I'm excited about the Detroit Center for Innovation and what that could mean about better connectivity between the University of Michigan and Ann Arbor entrepreneurs in Detroit. So.
Cool. So I guess in the early days of Duo Security, or in the earliest days of the companies that you guys have invested in or worked with, what were some of the resources? And we'll focus on Ann Arbor, but I guess I would be more broadly thinking like resources that would be available to entrepreneurs in these different emerging ecosystems. So like what specific resources are available that were just really, really critical in helping you?
I'll start. I think, there's a lot of, one of the strengths that we have, particularly in Ann Arbor, is really the culture and the people. And, as Kelly points out, we just grow, the cottage industry here is growing brains, right? So we have lots of really smart folks. When we think about, what it takes to build a successful company, you need, as I mentioned for your report, right? You need creativity, you need expertise, and you also need teamwork. And I like to think of that as kind of freaks, geeks, and jocks, and the Ann Arbor has that, right? It sort of has a long cultural history of countercultural history, I should say, starting from the 60s, lots of really innovative and, sort of visionary thinking, has obviously a wealth of expertise, right, at the university, and all the talent that draws. But also there's a pretty long legacy of business success in Michigan more generally, right, that is centered in Southeast Michigan, stemming around the autos and so forth, where you need business athletes as well. And I think, some of the specific resources that we drew from in those areas were, for instance, like the university had this awesome, I can't remember the name of it, but the Small Business Internship Award Program, I think it was. But they basically,
Marcel Ghani?
was that?
Is it Marcel Ghani?
No. That was another one. So Marcel Gagné, that was in the B school, so it's ELI related, but you could basically hire a MBA for kind of half price, right? In effect.
Yeah.
But the university, I think via the Center for Entrepreneurship over in engineering school, also had something similar, where again they would fund half of a head for interns, and we had a great time. SCIA, thank you. Someone we have a video on that. I remember we did for Linky. And but those kind of resources at the university, and more generally the entrepreneurial ecosystem that not only the university but also the town, right, via Spark and so forth supports, it was very real. Other parts of it we had to fill in the gaps around, right? So I think the things that I'm sure we'll get to that still sometimes are missing are the connective tissue between some of these different sometimes separate communities of innovation. And that becomes a problem, right? When innovation really is, as I think about it, the commercialization of invention, right? So the university has, billions of research funding, generates tons of patents. But on the other side of that, we have to make sure that there's enough companies that can produce around it. And it's not just Kelly's work, right? That does that. I mean, obviously tech transfer is a huge part of that being successful, but we need all the other pieces of that in the community to also be there, from investment, right? And, as Patti points out, and more capital to, our ability to draw more executive talent. If any challenge, there's no specific challenge we had that was maybe more difficult for us, it was in getting people to Michigan. It wasn't specifically about Ann Arbor, but trying to get folks to really consider moving here. And we did that, right? We stuck to our guns, headquartered here, brought as many folks as we could, but a very seasoned executive actually from California here, ended up living in Traverse City and commuting here every day or every week, which is kind of amazing. But very, very thankful for his efforts doing that. But again, there are lots of challenges, I think, sometimes when people think about their choice of where to live, where to raise family, where to start companies, that are much, much broader than just the entrepreneurial sort of ecosystem, and have a lot more to do sometimes with, again, what other support a city or a region provides for all the rest of what a person wants to do with their lives and careers. And so,
I would love to give a shout out to Spark. So it's a little known fun fact that I wrote the business plan for Governor Rick Snyder for the Ann Arbor IT zone, which was the predecessor to Spark. But when you think about communities and ecosystems, having a place, and this goes to what Doug was saying, but having a place where people can gather and have support. And over the past 2 decades, Spark's really evolved the services that they provide to the early stage entrepreneurs and have helped them continue to grow with their incubator space. So everything from like boot camps that help these companies start to say, are we a company? What is customer discovery? Are we doing the, do we really have something here, to some of these small grants early on where they can engage consultants or service providers to help them. Having these community hubs where resources are available, where entrepreneurs don't feel so alone, and they can start to find talent that's in the community, I think are really critical. So I do think Ann Arbor's really been served well by Spark, and certainly I don't want to leave out the Desai Accelerator. It's a little bit more recent, but certainly having accelerator programs or places where teams can evolve and grow prior to taking capital, but really getting prepped and ready to see, is my business really ready for high growth?
Interesting. Okay, what role, and this will be mostly for Kelly, what role does having a local research institution like the University of Michigan play in the development of an entrepreneurial ecosystem in Washtenaw County?
Yeah, well, I definitely have a perspective on that, and perhaps slightly biased one. But Emily, again, kudos on the report. And when I look through it, I see so many imprints of University of Michigan, whether it's a direct startup company that launched from the university, or the many talented students that graduated and left. So you can see that sprinkled throughout the report. And I just want to emphasize that research and innovation are incredibly important to the university's mission. But there's no doubt that our students are the biggest tech transfer that we do, and the transfer of talent and ideas. And our research really is there to help. One important thing it does is inform our teaching. It allows us to have faculty who oversee laboratories at the cutting edge of where the science is and where knowledge is. And so they're able to bring that to the classroom and bring the students into the laboratory. And that's one of the really unique things that the modern research university brings, is in the type of student that we're graduating and the type of exposure that they've had to cutting edge innovation, technology, and knowledge. So I think that's a big piece. And, if you look back at some of the clusters here that are most successful, you have things like Arbor Networks in the early days, paving the way and really helping to establish Ann Arbor, to the point with, now thanks to, Doug and his team and their wonderful leadership around Duo, we're now undoubtedly a cybersecurity hub, and we're, an area that's known for that. And so I think some of that can be traced to the university's early investments and the type of faculty that they attracted and supported and the type of research that was invested in.
Yeah, man, the people that are coming out of U of M, I went to Michigan State, so I'm like, shout out, shout out Michigan State. But I do feel like the talent coming out, like people are just so smart. Like, my God, like you're like working with people like every day. I think in any of these college towns that you work with people and you run into people just like by happenstance, like at different meetups and things that are just like, PhDs and like the leaders of like their sector and doing like cutting edge things. So like, I think that's a huge benefit of just like any college town. It's like the learning atmosphere.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And, we are producing a lot of startup companies. I think the last time I checked with our friends at Ann Arbor Spark, about 25% of the high-tech startups in Ann Arbor came out of U of M's tech transfer efforts. Last year, we go by fiscal year, Emily, so we're going to have to I'm also a data-driven person, so we'll have to translate the calendar year and match up our numbers. But, last year, our startup companies that were in the Ann Arbor area raised around $80 million. So it's a significant part of the overall venture-backed startups that stay in our community as well, are coming out of the university's research and innovation engine. So I think, obviously it's talent and it's innovation, and it's partnering with our economic development organizations like Spark and like the MEDC.
Yeah.
Actually, Charles, one thought for me here to your original question, Emily, on what might be missing. I think Brad Feld wrote a book on startup communities where he talks about the rise of Boulder and all this kind of thing, and I think points out pretty clearly that for startup communities to be sustainable, they have to be led by entrepreneurs. I think that we've had an embarrassment of riches, right, when it comes to all the service providers, a lot of the infrastructure, because we have big institutions and that are very successful, like university as well as Spark, able to provide a lot of that, sort of infrastructure. But I think in the last 10 years, the biggest trend I've seen is we've had many more founders that are willing to sort of lean in, help each other, and actually grow, events like, A2 New Tech, or be part of, any number of other industry consortiums or smaller groups supporting each other. Because that for me, I think is one of the biggest gaps that I saw when we started Duo, that, there wasn't a lot of, there had been plenty of other companies that came before us. There weren't so many folks that were willing to spend time with me or others. And you just never saw them, right? And even now, I think sometimes I'm always surprised sometimes to see those stats, right? That either you produce or, I think last year there was the American Center for Entrepreneurship, something. They produced this report that basically outlined how Ann Arbor was the #1 city in America when it came to support for female entrepreneurship, right? I mean, 50%.
When people say those like #1 things, like I'm like, oh my gosh,
Well, yeah, but I think the stat was that something like 50% of female-led startups in Ann Arbor anyway were successful in terms of their first time financings, which is basically 3 times in effect the sort of national average. And anecdotally, we sort of know some of these things, right? Because there's been a very, we have so many amazing, women founders here who have carried the water in this community for a long time. Jen Baird, Amory Sastry, Don White, and lots of serial entrepreneurs. But then, I don't know that in terms of how we represent kind of what our community is and kind of how it operates, that they're as visible, or that we connect those dots as much. I think Tech Transfer does a great job with their community of startups, with their annual report and all the kinds of things they do. Spark with their kind of thing. But as has been noted, the broader community is much larger than that, and yet we don't see a lot of coverage, right, of kind of all that goes on. So there are these kind of information gaps, I think, that sometimes happen in our community that we still need to bridge, and particularly regionally. A lot of what happens in Ann Arbor, people in Lansing don't know about, people in Detroit don't know about, and vice versa. And so, we have a lot more work I think we can do there.
Yeah, that is a really good point. So in EntryPoint's, in the Ann Arbor Entrepreneurial Ecosystem report that we just released on Monday, we talked about how 70% of the venture-backed startups in the Ann Arbor region had responded to our surveying about the impact that COVID-19 has had on their business. And 86% of those companies felt the impact of the global pandemic, but 94% said that they did feel that their company was at least somewhat prepared to operate during this time. And for reference, we did a similar study on just businesses generally, and that's significantly higher than a Main Street business. And we also found that 0% said they felt completely unprepared. So as a result, we're seeing that there's far less lost revenue. A significant number of them continue to be hiring, of tech companies continue to be hiring, and many of them have been able to tap into various relief programs and loans being offered. What do you think, since they are doing so well, what do you think are some of the kind of unintended consequences or negative fallout that we might see affect the tech community? It might not be happening right now, but kind of down the road as we kind of come out of the pandemic.
I think so this is a hard one, right? But I think there's a couple things. When you are a founder, you're taking a lot of risk, right? You're often leaving a place where you have good healthcare, and healthcare really important right now, right? Benefits, salary, and being able to take that leap of faith and seeing what the consequences are. So for those founders that don't have a backup partner who has the healthcare or the stable salary, this type of scary event may make a few folks less willing to take that leap down the line. I would say, though, that there are folks who have been forced to take that leap. And so that might counter that in terms of people who now are like, hey, I have the time now to devote to that idea, innovation that I really wanted to bring to market. So it might balance out, but I do think we see in these counter-cyclical times that folks might be a little bit more risk adverse because of the fear of losing some of the benefits that really do help folks live and survive.
Yeah, that makes sense. Doug, did you have something to add?
Well, I mean, I think, entrepreneurs and startups are built to really solve problems, right, that sometimes aren't being addressed well. There are many more problems, right, that we have to deal with today than maybe we did 10 years ago. And those problems, the opportunity to create solutions for them, I think is always, I personally actually love building businesses in economic downturns, right? We started Arbor just as the bubble was bursting. It went to kind of the telecom nuclear winter, right, which is the market we were going to sell into, which is interesting. We started Duo right on the heels of the Great Recession, right, coming out of 2008 and, at the end of 2009. And so, but in these kind of things, there's always winners and losers. I think the interesting thing will be to see, of the landscape. I'll go to madeina2.com, the catalog of a bunch of the startups that are here in Ann Arbor, and we look and see what they're doing, I'd be curious to understand if, for them, some of their markets might have really been dislocated, right, by what's happened. Because for some, like us in what we do, and, providing secure and safe access for folks anywhere around the world, now that every employee of most organizations is a remote employee, that's become a very big thing. But for lots of other organizations, like higher ed, for instance, I think I worry actually quite a bit for the university and all universities in terms of their value proposition. After housing and after, kind of the big finance bubble, people have thought that higher ed would be the other big bubble to burst. And the worry here is will it, right, with kind of what's happening, and university students maybe not, or the parents not wanting to pay the same tuition, right, for what's a very much degraded sort of experience. And so there's lots of these kind of things that there'll be kind of winners and losers in. But more broadly, I think, the other worry I have in general is it widens the gap. These kinds of economic dislocations have the real risk of driving more economic injustice. Yeah. One of the first things we did, my wife and I, after all this was happening, was we put $1 million to the community as grants through with help of Spark, with help of Washington County Office of Economic Development, but also the racial justice or racial equity group, to make sure that we could help support a lot of these small businesses, not necessarily startups, but a lot of folks get through this sort of gap funding of their own to the state and federal funding that would be on the way. And turned out we were right about that. It was going to be the pain to get to. Many folks still didn't get it, but also who actually received it. Our grants, we ended up targeting to be mostly focused on the underrepresented, like a lot of the economically underrepresented areas of our county. Largest concentration was Ypsilanti. But again, when people are already sort of, we already have the 8th most economically segregated county in the US, these kinds of big economic dislocations have the risk of even widening those kind of gaps for us. And so I think it means that we have to take more effort to be thoughtful about how we drive a success that everyone can enjoy. And so my hope here is that, the opportunity, the upside is that we can use this moment, right, to really help diversify the startup community, identify, as Kelly said, that the problems that actually matter. Right, we don't need more happy hour or food delivery apps, or maybe food delivery apps. I don't know.
I was like, hey.
Food delivery robots.
Yeah.
Reflection AI.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Matthew's got definitely probably an opportunity there. But I think, like how we've seen the community respond, I could be more proud of, right? Like the Ann Arbor Entrepreneurial Funds, or the social impact pitch competition that's going to happen by the end of the year, by the end of the month, really focusing on grants for businesses that are trying to solve some of these new and emerging problems we've had to deal with. Even VFA Detroit has a whole social venture fund that's backed by the Desai folks. Yeah. Supports social entrepreneurship at this moment in time. So I think there's lots of really interesting opportunities for us to do better, right, coming out of all this. But again, there's always a risk that we won't.
Yeah, I do worry, just because other research that we've done even has shown very, very clearly that these relief programs, not in the one that you guys did, but the like PPP loan and things like that, are very often not going to minority-owned businesses. And it's white male-owned businesses that are getting the majority of that funding. And so it does concern me kind of more globally that companies that are struggling right now that are running, there's going to be fewer minority-owned and woman-owned led companies. And then even as we come out of it, I think like that a lot of women are taking a step back and might be having to do homeschooling and taking that role on, and are going to be not as likely to start companies and things like that, so that we might see this kind of not just have an impact on this year, but even down the road when you're looking at like who has access to funding and who has the ability to start a company.
Emily, I want to say everything I'm seeing agrees that the PPP program just reinforced some of the structural disparities that we already had in the entrepreneurial community. And those that didn't have, close ties to banks weren't able to access them in the early days. That did improve, but it largely seems to have reinforced disparities. I think also the thing, I mean, we know many schools are going to be closed this fall, so we know that disproportionately responsibility falls on women. So, I think companies would be wise to think about how they're, supporting their workforce of, child rearing years, but also single parent households. I mean, how are they going to manage in this time? And imagine trying to be an entrepreneur or even an employee at that time when you have one or more kids at home all day. So, there's definitely going to be some consequences, societal ones of this.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what the talent pool looks like because of that in the next 5 years even.
Yeah, but that's why I am really hopeful, because I think that, I do think technology can be a great equalizer. You don't have to come from family wealth. You don't need connections. Connections are still helpful, but you don't need a factory, land, right, to be successful in tech. You just need, yourself and maybe a computer and some access. But again, who actually has those things, right, is even still a problem. And I think Skillman has this whole project right now. They're trying to drive a $32 million sort of funding for really help close the digital divide in Detroit, where they're trying to get computers to 53,000 school kids and 35,000 families. We have those kind of issues here, like if you look at Ypsilanti and so forth, and not every family was ready to go and have their kids jump online, right, to get to continue their schooling. Those things will they'll have an impact if a negative impact if we don't actually take care to create the right pathways to success to have folks be able to participate in what will happen next.
Yeah, that's good. And on that note, geez, okay, try to turn it around. Okay, so of the 55 venture-backed startups in Washington County, only 15% are led by people of color and 13% are led by women. So both of these communities have been disproportionately affected by COVID, and there's been a rising disgust across the country about injustice and discrimination against the Black community, other people of color, and women. These societal issues will have an effect on everything from high school graduation rates, college attendance, ability to move up the ranks of a company, and that will all play into numbers not getting any better. So I guess speaking to Doug's point, what can be done to offset this imbalance and make sure there are increasing opportunities for women and people of color to be included in the tech community? Because I think that was already something people were worried about before this.
Yeah, I mean, Emily, this is a deep, deep personal passion of mine and Invest Detroit. And, it's every single person's responsibility to thinking about inclusion and how do we diversify our teams, how do we diversify, the folks that are within our control. And so finding talent that does not look like ourselves in the mirror, or, helping encourage people who do look like us, for women or for minorities, really making sure we're making an effort to build our teams in a diverse way. I think from my perspective, that has gone a long way to building trust within the communities we operate. Because when you are talking, especially in a capital perspective, if the people across the table look like you, the willingness to trust, the willingness to take that next step are much higher. And so that, again, that intentionality around that each of us has to have and own in terms of finding talent. And, talent's now an interesting proposition. Doug really hit this well, is companies don't have to hire locally anymore. We've realized that virtual can work very well. And so our talent pool has gone from sort of a micro Ann Arbor or Detroit metro region now to a national, if not global, community. So being thoughtful about how do we, again, as responsible founders or responsible investors, how do we how do we make sure that we're finding talent that will help attract or draw additional diverse talent? And this is diversity across many different forms, not just women and minorities, but not building cultures that are where everybody's the same, but where people are bringing something different to the table.
So I'll go to that point as well. I mean, oh, sorry, Kelly, go ahead.
No, okay. No, I was just going to say, I think also we have to remember to start early when we want to address the gap in high tech and high paying jobs. And I love working at a university where, we believe that talent is widespread, but opportunity is not. So there's a couple of programs, at University of Michigan, like the Wolverines Pathways program, which is college readiness for kids 7th through 12th grade, and tuition support if they're able to get into the U of M, Ann Arbor, Dearborn campuses as well. We have the Go Blue Guarantee, and both of these programs are science-based, because we knew that even though we had a lot of scholarships and tuition support for students, kids who could get in and could thrive aren't applying to high caliber schools because they don't think they can afford it. We know that they can afford it, and the science showed that they're more likely to apply if you just come out and say out loud, if you get in and your family makes less than $65K a year and you live in the state of Michigan, your tuition is fully covered. And saying that out loud, being forthright about that and funding it has been a priority for the university. And I think that helps bring, an economically diverse group of students into campus. There's much more we need to do, I think, in how we go about educating the next generation of tech leaders. I think we could have a whole session around that.
Yeah.
But Doug and I sit on the board together for Venture for America, and they're working really hard to bring diverse set of college grads to become entrepreneurs, placing them with startup companies, and a lot of them with Detroit-based startup companies, which is another great program. There's some interesting policies out being explored, like the new Business Preservation Act, which would partner with states by bringing additional funding for startups outside of the big 3 tech hubs, so in the rest of America. And they've got a stated focus on supporting women and minority-led businesses. I mean, so I do think having some, focus programs at the early level, at the national level, are important. And I think it's important to look at, science as a way to help guide these policy interventions.
Yeah, I think we have choices to make, right? And I think if we want to be sure that we secure these outcomes that really are more equitable, there's work and choices we have to make to really change that ratio with decisions that we're going to have to make individually, as in our companies, as well as regionally in terms of policy. And so for me, personally, I've chosen to come into as an investor into venture funds that are really focusing on some of these issues. Like one venture firm I'm really excited about is Operator Collective. It's basically all female LPs. Malin Yen, who organizes SaaStr, the largest SaaS conference in the world, runs this thing. But other than me and Eric Yuan, for CEO Zoom, and I think one other fellow, it's all women. But with a clear and focus on supporting minority and female-led businesses. But elsewhere, I just joined the regional chamber with a specific intent to try to figure out how can we achieve more of a regional strategy around inclusive entrepreneurship and tech, or inclusive participation in what's a growing tech community. Because it can't just be Ann Arbor, right? For us to be successful, we need to see and leverage kind of what exists more broadly around us. And though we don't think of Ann Arbor as Metro Detroit for some reason, often we are, right? We're closer to Detroit than San Francisco is to San Jose, which is in Silicon Valley. And the problems we have to solve there, I think, to make that real is how do we connect people, opportunity, and dollars. And so when I look at some of the most successfully diverse tech communities, like where I came from, like the DC metro area, where federal spending is mandated, right? Some percentage of it toward SBA, small business, disadvantaged businesses, 8A designation, women, minority, or veteran owned. they've done a great job because they basically have a strategy and a plan, and they're executing well toward that. I think for us to be successful in this way, we probably need to be more thoughtful about that when it comes to our economic development strategy, so we can achieve economic justice as we think about racial and social justice as well. And so, anyway, so I'm hoping that at some point when we get to more sort of broader thinking about what the city wants to become, it includes sort of look at the economics of all this as well, because Detroit Future City has done some really nice work for Detroit. That their report last year thinking about there's no resurgent in Michigan without resurgent in Detroit. There's no resurgent in Detroit without resurgent Black middle class. And you can actually map that out neighborhood by neighborhood in Detroit and understand what those gaps are, and develop policies and programs and support to get there. I think we still need to do that kind of work here, and I think it's a big opportunity for us. Yeah,
definitely. So in our Ann Arbor report, we did a timeline of significant events that have shaped the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Washtenaw County over the last 20 years. So such as the founding of companies like Handy Lab and Arbor Networks, Zellery Institute opening at the University of Michigan, the start of Arboretum Ventures, which is now 70 million under management. They're doing pretty good. As well as Aspiria and Duo Security being acquired. What are your impressions on the things that have moved the needle the most in the Ann Arbor community? So types of events that you think, just an easy question.
Duo success, since Doug won't say it, but I mean, I think that's it's been a great signaling event for us as a cluster in that area. I think you can't overstate the impact that's had.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know that that's had as. I think it'll take more time to see how that all plays out. And my hope here is that, as we've always talked about, we always want to do it be a great company to work at, but also a great company to be from, right? And at some point, we do expect that there'll be lots more sort of after effects of that startup success, hopefully generating many more companies here that can be successful. But those actually, there's before us, there were 15 years, right, of startups, startup exits, averaging about 200 million a year, I think. Accuray, Handy Lab, 4C, all these others. And I think it's important that we also look on the other side of that, like what the community looks like. I'm really excited to see events like A2 New Tech, right, where for 10 years, every month, we've had 5 new companies present. That's a lot of startups, right? And we're over 7,000 members. And I'm always surprised to see the kind of folks that show up to that event, particularly coming from out of state or whatever else. But we need more of that. And when 4C, as part of Answers and so forth, started, unfortunately, having to do some layoffs, there were some pink slip parties, right, that we organized to help make sure that all those employees would land within this community. For me, though I totally understand Patti's point of view on this, which is, talent's everywhere, and we should be able to, kind of build a lot of these teams remotely. I still really believe fundamentally that place matters, and that this place matters, right? And that we should try to keep these dollars and investment and opportunities, be thoughtful about how, again, we create more success around ourselves regionally versus spreading it out, because that is the opportunity we have, right, to see more success amongst the friends, family, and community members that we all live with. So for me, it's more of like the kind of grassroots stuff that I've been most excited about. The fact that there's, before the pandemic, there's like almost a tech event every night, right, in Ann Arbor. A2 Geeks previously, but now madeina2.com has really been cataloging a lot of that stuff. I think that, more and more things like the Ann Arbor Entrepreneurs Fund will hopefully pull together more founders into a real network. I know that these existed before that group, but we should need a lot more of them, ways to organize founders to really pay it forward and get involved with the next generation companies. I think we have many, many successful exited founders who should be on more boards. And we used to do nonprofit board governance training at new out of 18 New Tech, getting a bunch of tech folks on local nonprofit boards, but there's so many startups, right, that could use kind of guidance, from a lot of these prior founders. And those are the kind of connections I think and bridges we need to start building more intentionally, right, to see an acceleration of our success here.
Yeah, that is such a good point. Adam Goodman is always so good too from Duo about like even getting into politics and like helping those types of initiatives move forward. And I always like look to him for like political guidance. I'm just like, if Adam said it, then I'll just do that. Yeah, I definitely think what you're saying about like earlier about like being a founder-led community and really tracking that talent from and being a company that like is a great place to be from. And I think tracking even like the founders, which you've talked about and Doug's talked about in the past, between different companies and how they're kind of like playing out, and even seeing like Census now was people that were working at Duo, and then people from Duo were working at Arbor Networks, and like seeing kind of all of that track through, and that success I think has been really, really interesting and impactful.
And I think like we can't. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Patti.
I was just going to say, like, that just seems like a great opportunity for, the infrastructure and the economic development groups to support the founders, through with, some sort of informal early founders mentoring program, just as you were describing it and Maria Thompson is chatting about it. I think we've had a great idea born of this webinar. So yeah, I'm excited about that idea, maybe being able to follow up on that.
I just want to make one more comment about the growth over the past, especially the past decade. I think we can't forget the symbiotic relationship between the larger corporations, the startups, the universities, people, talent moving between these three. And so having Detroit really revitalized and a place where talent from the universities can go to a big city, right? And be a part of an urban environment. Having Quicken Loans, making sure that our corporations are strong and that we're attracting the Googles and the Amazons and the larger corporations to the state too, because I think they all play together, because talent does move between sort of these three. And so we've seen, Quicken Loans has done a lot for the Detroit community and bringing sort of that revital energy back for young people to want to come and live in the city of Detroit. But that enables Ann Arbor too, right? It's keeping talent in the metro area, as Doug was saying, and making sure that our companies are growing because we have a place for people to move between.
I'm going to endeavor to do 3 more questions, even though we have 8 more minutes. So I wanted to touch on really quickly. So Doug, you have kind of like been, you're like an Ann Arbor OG. And I feel like I've kind of seen your role within the community evolve over time. And I feel like you seem to be very intentional about like what the evolving role of a founder in the community as you kind of achieve different successes is. What part do you feel like that evolving role of founders plays in the growth of entrepreneurship in the region?
Yeah, I think there's a growth curve for every business if it's successful. Startups, the difference between a startup and a small business, I think, is what we said, the search for a scalable business model. But going from startup to growth to scale really requires like a different set of skill sets and perspectives and so forth, and motivations, right? Not everyone is sort of interested or always appropriate for each of those stages. When we started Duo, there were very few places to look, right? Because we hadn't seen a lot of that before, of companies getting to kind of a scale that we were hoping to do with Duo. And there were very, very practical books on the subject. I mean, even now, I think, since we started Duo 10 years ago, there are only like maybe 3 startup books that I really ever recommend. Like one is Startup CEO, right? With Matt Blumberg is on the roll. High Growth Handbook by Eli Gill, which is fantastic, actually. It's kind of what you do if you talk to a whole bunch of other really smart CEOs, start CEOs. But the other is Growing Pains by Eric Flumholtz, which is kind of more of a academic kind of study of how companies scale and the organizational design and the life cycle. But anyway, I do think, folks need to have some idea of what the journey looks like. And sometimes it's really hard to find examples of that. But for folks like myself, maybe others who've also, had exits previously in the community, the one thing I'd suggest is it goes beyond mentorship. Mentorship is really kind of providing people advice or help, or actually really advice, right? But sponsorship, I think, is way more important. I think most people that I ever talk to, they say, "Hey, can you be my mentor?" I'm like, "You don't want me as a mentor because I don't know a damn thing about your business. I don't know your space or whatever. But I'd be happy to help." And sponsorship is different. It's about picking up the phone and making the call, right, to make sure you help provide access, introductions, not just advice. And because truly a lot of early stage startup issues are just like any small business concern, right? There's not that much difference when you're in the first 3 years and you're just fighting for your life. But I think getting access to the right networks, people, expertise, and having that outside perspective will help you, I think is truly important. And that's something I do think that we need to see more actively within this community. Even at Cisco, right? We started this program called Multiply Diversity, and it's basically a sponsorship program where every Cisco exec and leader is basically agreed to help sponsor and help pay forward some of the success by ensuring that folks who are disadvantaged, right, from having the same level of access to those those pathways to success get that help. And, actually anyone can sign up for that if you check out the website, multiplydiversity.com. But the notion here is that we just need more folks to really help pay it forward, take chances on each other, make those connections. Because I think, honestly, a lot less of our long-term and forward success will be about the specific policies and things like infrastructure, but much more about the relationship with the culture. I do think there's still something of an inferiority complex we have sometimes as Michiganders about whether Michigan startups are good enough or good, or like buyers, right? When they look at them, University of Michigan was one of the last customers in higher ed to buy Duo, right? And we sold like all of Ohio State and the state of Ohio, Ornet, right, before we sold University of Michigan.
I love that you say that, because we have learned from that, and we now have a wonderful Chief Information Officer, Doug, that has realized that's not the look we want to have in supporting and engaging our tech entrepreneurs. So Ravi Pensie's done a great job. He's taken every introduction I provided to a local tech company. I wanted to talk to you of them. So we have learned. So keep saying it, Doug, because it will help us learn and improve.
Okay, and then so kind of dovetailing off of that, as we kind of are entering another economic downturn, what is your advice for people that may be out of work soon or are thinking like, this is my chance to start a company because I'm like, not doing my day job and like, this is my thing. What do you think your advice would be of people thinking now is the time?
Make sure it really is the right idea, right? So just because it's the right time doesn't mean it's the right idea. So you still have to apply the discipline. There's a lot of resources out there, the evolving around how you figure out whether your company's worth or your idea is worth pursuing or not. There's just so many resources out there today than there were 20 years ago. So really be thoughtful about, is my idea the right one to move forward right now? What is capital availability going to look like? How have the changing environment around COVID, how will that influence my ability to move this idea forward? So if it's a great idea, I think as Doug was saying, it doesn't matter when you start it, a great idea will be a great idea, but make sure it is a great idea and that the world hasn't changed fundamentally in a way that makes what maybe was a great idea once not so much a great idea anymore. So don't just take a leap because the time is right, take the leap because the idea is right.
Maybe adding on to Patti, there, you can also talk to customers, right? Talk to customers before you start, which will help you understand again whether your idea really will hold water. But the other is just even personally have a safety net and kind of build your own personal board of directors, right? To help advise you as you think about kind of what that could look like. Because again, it's nobody builds a company just on their own steam. You have all the support of your friends and often family, right? I started Duo when my wife was 6 months pregnant with our second child. Not a great time to go and start burning down our savings and so forth, but that's why. If you need the help of your family, my wife is a saint and she is truly my better half. Duo would not exist if it weren't for those kinds of dynamics playing out successfully. So me not getting divorced, I guess, right?
Yeah. I love it. Okay, then what do you all feel needs to happen in the next 20 years to continue the growth and health of the tech community?
So I would like to see us have more clusters of successful startup companies that have 300 plus employees in sectors like hardware, advanced materials, med device, therapeutics. We've got the cybersecurity one. It's growing, it's vibrant. We need to repeat that success across different clusters that map with our innovation and talent pipelines. So just that.
I would add that, when you're talking about founders, mentorship, or sponsorship, I think it goes multiple layers within our companies. So often sales, marketing, business development, being able to pull talent, and whether it's past alumni from University of Michigan or just from the state of Michigan, or folks who have expertise in some of these very specific industries, it goes throughout an organization. And so making sure that talent on a startup team has access to people who can help them. I really firmly believe we reinvent the wheel way too much here in Michigan. And so making sure from a startup perspective, we have connection to resources for everyone in a company in a leadership position to be able to grow and find, just again, not recreate information that's already known.
Yeah, I think for the next 20 years, for in order to be successful, we have to have a regional success right across Southeast Michigan, particularly toward Detroit. But maybe even all the way out to Grand Rapids, right? The I-96 kind of innovation corridor, right? But I think when I think about this stuff, I think top down. Tech hubs. We've seen plenty of examples where tech communities are really strange bedfellows with the cities in which they operate. I think healthy tech ecosystems have to support healthy cities and also just cities, right? And so when I think about that, there's a certain infrastructural kind of concerns we all kind of deal with. Three in particular, I call it all the time: development, affordability, and public transit. Those things either work together or they tear a region apart, right, when they don't work hand in hand. And so I think we have to be thoughtful about how development, affordability, public transit create a more equitable environment for shared success. But there's other structural inequities that I think, as a community, we can all spend more time on. Part of the goal of the Ann Arbor Entrepreneurs Fund is really to see these kinds of activities and success really lead directly into community success, right? We took the group of founders, the A2EF, to food gatherers recently. There's all the social venture fund stuff that we're doing. But again, having a highly active founder community, I think in the city, I think would be really helpful. But the third is sort of like around more of the grassroots stuff, right? Just on a community level, we have to engineer our luck. And so it's great that we have, programs that really kind of take people through a trajectory, maturity curve, right, of their businesses, through university or through Spark, what have you. But just as much, we need, kind of the moral support, right, that places like Cahoots, Tech Brewery, and a lot of these kind of startup hubs provide. Or even like like coffee shops, Ruse Roast, right, for a lot of the early stage founders, Cafe Zola for a bunch of VCs, it seems like, and all the events that support, kind of that community. But yeah, I think, what you're doing too, Emily, right, like seriously pulling together the data so we can actually, understand. You have to measure what matters, and we have to understand whether we're doing better or not. And so for a long time, I think the community sort of flown blind on kind of what all this has looked like. Each of us, like a blind man and an elephant, right? We all have like a different idea of what this community actually is. More and more, I think, as we work with you all to put together more of a view that we can all share, I think those will be things that help guide us.
Yeah, hopefully. We are out of time, but we do have 3 questions if you guys want to stick around for a second. So one comes to us from Washington, D.C., Revolution Ventures, Revolution Steve Case's fund. They would like to, and they're responsible for Rise of the Rest, which people may have heard of. They're wondering what policies or ideas for helping entrepreneurial ecosystems and startups survive during COVID-19. So what kind of ideas and policies do you think would help?
You know, it's interesting. I had someone from San Jose Economic Development reach out to me and say, hey, Invest Detroit, you did this tech startup stabilization fund. Tell us more about it. We didn't do anything like this in San Jose. We think we probably should. So I know it was a small fund, $3 million, in which we allocated to the startups really early in the COVID timeframe, but it was to give companies, our high growth, high tech companies, the time to shift to virtual, to kind of bridge those couple months while they're trying to figure out what does sales remote look like? How do we make sure everyone's safe? Do we have a gap in production? Or, we obviously serve companies across many different industries, but just making sure that there was enough capital to help bridge some of these gaps. And I think there are certain industries and certain startups that are disproportionately affected now. The finance space, if you're selling to hospitals, certainly the restaurant industry. There are places where having focused programs that help shore up the investments that have already been made in the tech ecosystems, especially tech ecosystems that are not the big 3, right? We're all still trying to make sure that, there's investments coming in from states, local, private foundations, and not losing that momentum. And this is the time not to kind of drop that ball. We do absolutely have to support the Main Street and our small, but more lifestyle businesses, absolutely, because they are, the heartbeat of our communities, but we can't drop our investment in the tech community as well. We've got to keep a focus there, and we've got to keep driving dollars and talent to that sector.
Yeah, I'll maybe speak on behalf, and Kelly, you can correct me if I'm out of line here, but of Venture for America, Detroit, whose board again, Kelly and I will sit on, but I would love
me
to.
too.
Sorry.
That's all right.
But I would love to see outside support for some of those placements, because right now there is a hurdle. There's a 7,000. Well, there's a cost that companies have to apply for some of the hundreds of interns that VFA has, and it's a really rare opportunity to inject a bunch of talent from a bunch of great universities across the country into these communities. And again, actually this class in Detroit is amazing. It's majority minority. It's mostly women, and again, we were able to cover some of that via the DESI support for the social impact or social fund, but I think if Revolution wanted to come in to help with some of this, I think that'd be wonderful. I'm an LP in Rise of the Rest too, and I think that seeing more direct investment in a bunch of these economically underrepresented communities is going to be a tremendous opportunity, because you see all these people fleeing San Francisco right now for good reason, and I hope they do come back. I hope we see a lot of folks come again, right? Boomeranging back here. If we can create the right conditions for them.
Yeah. Kelly, do you have anything to add?
I mean, just the one that I had mentioned earlier, which, isn't necessarily COVID specific, but is more recovery focused around ideas like the New Business Preservation Act and specific programs in there that support women and minority-led businesses. I think all of these pieces are going to be important. Reinvestment in our research infrastructure is going to be important to economic recovery and to bolstering the communities that we live in as well. So it's it's going to take a lot of work.
Yeah, that startup visa thing issue is a real, that is one of the rare opportunities we do have. We bring in so many wonderful foreign students, right, into our communities here. But then again, it's difficult for them to stay. And Zatu, a company I joined as a VP engineering, we had to deal with those kind of concerns, right, with foreign national founders who were PhD students out of the University of Michigan and so forth. But I remember when I first met Paul Graham at one of his events, he asked, well, what's so great about Michigan? I said, well, there's lots of things, but one of the really interesting opportunities we do have is that we're so close to the border, and that there are ways to go and get, renew those visas. There are ways in which we can get set up. We're not that far from, great universities. UM's great, but there's many more sort of within a 100-mile sort of radius of us. So, maybe there are some more policy kind of things that we could be looking at as well. Because some of those, like one of Duo's former employees who's now gone on to start his own company, did so through GTRI, the Global Talent Retention Initiative, and a program at Global Detroit that allowed him to stay here, right, as a foreign national, and built his business on a different visa. So things like that actually do matter. And if there are ways that we could accelerate some of those kind of efforts, that'd be great too.
Yeah, great. Okay, I don't want to hold you guys forever, so I will say thank you so much for staying 10 extra minutes and also for joining us. It's been so awesome. I wish I could just talk to you guys all day long. And then thank you for audience members for tuning in. And then if anybody wants to check out, we'll be posting this conversation on our social media channels. EntryPoint MI is our handle. And yay, well, thanks. And I will talk to you all soon.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Patty.
Thank you.
Doug.
Thanks,
Thanks, Molly.